So the iPhone 16 Pro Max has an incredible camera, but what are the best settings for the videos and photos? How to take the most out of your camera on your iPhone? In today's video, let's go over through the settings on the iPhone 16 Pro Max, but that can be actually used on the different iPhone 16 series of phones. But let's go over the settings and see what we can do to make the camera performance the best that we can. So when we go over to the settings and then we go to the camera, as you can see, we have all the different settings. The first one, the camera control, doesn't really matter. I guess it's up to your personal preference. The photographic styles are the new addition where you can change the colors. You don't change anything here, you just leave it as it is, and you can change that in the camera app if you wanted to. Now here is the thing, I switch all the recording to a little bit different, to the one that I use the most. And I feel like it's gonna be different for everybody. It's gonna depend on what you want to do with the camera. I personally like to have it 4K 60 frames per second because with the 60 frames per second, not only the footage looks smooth, just more like clear, smooth, it can also be slowed down by 50% and still have a nice slow motion. So everything is slowed down by 50%, which is really cool. And that is why I have it at 4K 60 frames per second. But for everyday situations, you can put it at 4K 30 frames per second if you prefer so. It's gonna look a little bit more natural, but like I said, you cannot slow it down in post-production. And because of this, I actually want the 60 frames per second just for the ability in case I wanted to slow it down. You can save space if you go for Full HD, but with the size of the storage that we have on the phones now, I just go 4K 60 frames per second. It just looks better. But if you want to save some space, you can go for Full HD and maybe put it at 60 or 30 frames per second. What I would suggest is just think about what you're gonna use it for. If you're just a casual user and don't really care about quality, just go for Full HD 60, for example. But if you want like a everyday camera, then 4K 30 frames per second is gonna be nice. But if you know that sometimes you would like a little bit more smooth video or you want to have that ability to slow it down in post-production, then 4K 60 frames per second is gonna be that sweet spot. That is my preferred way to shoot. I don't change it to PAL formats because that turns into 25 and 50 frames per second. Not something I use ever, so not even looking at this. Enhanced stabilization on, it just makes it a little bit better looking. I prefer stabilization to be on. Action mode, lower light, I didn't change that. You can do it, but I just didn't use it enough to see the difference. So do it at your own, experience. HDR video, you can turn it on. It's gonna make it look a little bit better, but you can also turn it off. It's gonna depend on how you're gonna use the footage. If you're just using it for your iPhone, then I would say it's nice to have, it's gonna look better. But if you're, for example, using the footage for your videos and you want to edit them in post-production, maybe turning this off could be a good option. Auto FPS, this is a hard one. Normally I would say it's an off for me. But, sometimes it's good to have a little bit better quality, and knowing how this camera performs in low light, sometimes it's gonna be good to have it at auto 30 and 60 frames per second. So if you know you're shooting a lot in lower light situation, maybe that is gonna be a good option. For me, it's an auto off, just so that I can have a little bit more control over my footage. Lock camera is off and lock white balance off. That can be actually changed. I would say that log white balance could be a good situation if you don't want that temperature and everything, the colors changing when you record. And that can actually be something that looks unprofessional in your videos. So I would actually go for log white balance. It just makes everything look more professional and doesn't have that changing of temperature. Now if we go a little bit lower, as you can see, we have the record slow motion. I put it at 4K 120 frames per second, but you could change it to Full HD. I prefer 4K just to maximize the potential from the cameras on the iPhone. Record cinematic at 4K 30 frames per second, we're not changing that. Record sound, I think the spatial audio is really cool. It is automatic and it is like an intelligent mode, but I do like it. I just feel like it's really cool. So if you're, for example, zooming in, it's gonna try to, zoom in where it's listening from. So it's not gonna be as loud from maybe you, but from the situation you're recording at, but more about the situation you're recording. If you prefer it to be that you're recording something far away, but still you want to voice over something, I would actually change it to stereo. But in other way, just leave it as spatial audio. In terms of formats, here is the most important part, I think, of the camera. See, we have the high efficiency and most compatible. I would say high efficiency is the nicer of the two. It just looks better on the iPhone screen. And maybe if you're just using the iPhone for, just taking a photo from the iPhone and put it on social media, then that would be fine. But for example, if you're making videos or photo editing in post-production, I would actually prefer to go for the most compatible. The reason for that is if you import your video, for example, from the iPhone 16 Pro Max to your DaVinci Resolve or Adobe Premiere Pro, it's gonna look the way it should. It's not gonna look overblown, it's not gonna look worse. But if I did actually have the high efficiency on, a lot of times I noticed that it was overblown, saturation was all over the place, everything just looked so, washed out. So if you have that situation, I would highly recommend you to change to most compatible. This one is the best if you want to take your footage on your computer and edit in post-production. It's gonna make it much easier, much faster, and just overall look better. So it's all depending on how you're gonna use it. If you're just using it for your own usage, high efficiency is great, but if you are actually thinking about editing the photos or videos in post-production, I would really go for the most compatible. The photo mode, I stayed with the 24 megapixel. For the ProRes and resolution control, I did turn it on, and then they have the ProRes Max, so it's up to 48 megapixel. Also, we have the JPEG lossless, most compatible, so it's just most compatible with everything. If you don't care about the RAW capabilities, I would turn it off. Because if you're just taking the photo and posting it on social media the way it is without much editing, I would just leave it at without it. It's just another icon that is going to show up and you just don't need it. But if you sometimes want to have a raw picture and you want to edit that in post-production on your computer or even on the mobile apps, and then just turn it on off the photos when you want the ProRes be implemented into the photo. So it's going to be a raw photo that you can really take advantage in post-production. In terms of video capture, it's the same situation. It's once again the Apple ProRes, which is like a raw recording of the video. So it's going to be much more flat and much better flat picture profile for your post-production. And if you want to color grade in post-production, then I would highly recommend you to turn it on and then just turn the log on whenever you want to. You don't have to have it at all times. It doesn't mean that if you've turned on here, it's gonna be on all times. Thanks to this, whenever you see a situation where you thought, you know what, I would like to shoot this in RAW, in ProRes, and really take advantage of full capabilities in my editing software, then you can have it at just one button and then it's right away there. So you don't have to go to the menu and the settings once again. And for the encoding, I went with the log. You can go with HDR. I wanted the log because I wanted to have the flat picture profile. If you prefer the HDR, go for it. But for me, if I'm doing the ProRes, I'm doing the taking advantage of the camera, I'm going for log so that I can have full advantage of it in post-production in color grading. And then if we go lower, as you can see, we have the scan QR codes. I will leave this as it is. Show detected text could be left as it is. If you need grids, level, it's up to you. I would say personal preference. Grids and levels can be great, especially if someone like me sometimes just takes the photo and it's not straight. So it's nice to have the grids and the level, but it's not something I would have to say that you need for your photos. So it's up to you if you like that. I would say for most users, this is not something that is needed, but if you notice that your photos are crooked or just not straight, that is a nice way to correct that. View outside of the frame, I would leave it on. When you're on the normal camera and you see a little bit wider, so you can see maybe something is missing in the shot, so I'll leave it on. Fusion camera, I will leave it as it is. Portrait in photo mode, leave it on. Prioritize faster shooting, yes. Lens correction, yes. And then the macro control, yes. But I do have to say that the macro isn't the best on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. I just wish it was on the telephoto and not on the wide angle lens. And also on the camera app, I did turn off the live photos. I know it's a cool feature, I just turned it off, but if you're in an ecosystem of Apple users, well, then I would say that is a cool feature to have, but I did turn that off. I would say those are the most important parts about the camera app and camera settings for the iPhone 16 Pro Max. It's a great camera experience, so you can really push a lot with the iPhone 16 Pro Max. And these are the best settings for photo and video on the iPhone. With that being said, that is going to be the end of today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this video once again, and I'll see you next time.